Karan and Roshan, I am extremely delighted to have you both on Filmi Shilmi. It's wonderful that 7 Days is getting its premiere here in the UK as part of the last strand at BFI London Film Festival. And I've seen the film and it was quite a wonderful watch. So, congratulations and welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
excited to meet you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 7 days, it presents an unexpected date over the lockdown period, which suddenly happens. And it's still something which is quite fresh in our minds. I mean, when I saw, the gloves and everything, it's still something which is still very much a part of our lives. So, I guess bearing that in mind, I guess it must have been quite personal, I guess, for you, Roshan, to sort of present all these aspects, in the film in that sense, because it's something which you have been very familiar with. We all have been, right?
Yeah, I guess it was personal. I think it was the time we were all living in at the time we made it because we made it in September of 2020. So I think the pandemic was very much on our minds. Not that it's really left our minds, but yeah, this story was very rooted in things we were both going through.
Mhm.
Right. And it's also interesting how in the film you kind of mention Kal Ho Na Ho, actually. I quite found that a really nice link. And, just thinking about it, I don't know, maybe it was just my journalistic brain that was just thinking like twice ahead. But it's interesting because we have a voice of reason in that film through Ravi's character, as well as, an unhappy character through Rita. And obviously it's set amidst like a pandemic, which is obviously a medical sort of issue as well. So I guess how much of a reference point was Corona actually for you, Roshan, about the making of the film?
Well, we really made it together because we wrote it together and went through every part of it together. And I am not as closely connected to Kahanaho as Kern is, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it was on one of our early dates that I we're also dating that I basically did a version of a recap of that movie because it's my
Oh.
favorite Bollywood movie, and so I remember Roshan was just like shocked. I just recapped scene by scene the entire
Yeah,
movie,
it
and
means
then
a lot to Kern, that movie.
yeah, and then at
Yeah,
some point when we were thinking of ideas for what to do in this movie, I think you had the idea to be like, we just have to put that in there, like what you
yeah.
did on that date, which is I just recap the whole movie. And I think the actual what we shot is even longer, and then the editor just chopped it up
Yeah, at
because
one point we were trying to actually recap the
a
movie,
3 hour movie.
but
Yeah, I did a full, yeah, like we did this full thing. But
yeah,
I'm always happy to reference that movie.
Yeah, but that's what the beauty is, about that film and about what your character as well, because you're talking about Say's character, Rohit, and in that he was obviously quite idiosyncratic. He had his quirks in that, and so does your character, and obviously Rita's character, which is played by Geraldine. Obviously she's also quite a dukhi atma, I think, in many ways. The best
Yeah.
way to sort of like describe her. So it's quite interesting how that sort of pattern came about. But no, I completely agree. I love that film too, and it's always going to be very special. But I think, speaking more about the direction and the writing as well, the fact that the film is mainly set in one geographical location, which is obviously Rita's home, with predominantly two characters. Obviously, we see other characters as well. How challenging was it for you as a filmmaker and as a writer, Roshan, as well, and Karan, to not allow these literal restrictions to restrict you creatively when you are sort of going through that process?
yeah. Well, it was actually designed amidst the restrictions. The whole idea was to make something during a time when nobody was making anything, because in September 2020, most productions were closed down, except maybe a little bit in the UK, but at least in America, everything was shut. And the whole idea was to make something that was makeable in those times, which meant one location and meant as few actors as possible.
Okay.
So the whole movie was born of the restrictions rather than accommodating to them, if that makes sense. We wrote the script knowing we would only shoot in one location. Um,
Oh, wow.
so yeah, but I actually think it helped make the movie better in many ways, especially because it was the first time either of us had embarked on something quite like this. It allowed us to focus a lot more. Um, but yeah, it I feel that, like, especially rewatching it multiple times, I don't get a feeling of claustrophobia from it like I was worried about when we set out to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
that was something that you were always pushing for in the writing process was just like we have these restrictions, but how can we tell a story that we would want to watch no matter what with these, like that the restrictions almost, you don't even matter because the characters in the story is like enough of a entertaining world to be in that you almost forget that you're just in this house. And that was always the goal, to like find a story that we would be like, this would work in this setting. And that was always the challenge, I think, when we're coming up with all the scenes and how to move the story forward and all the twists and turns.
Wow.
Yeah, this is really a play in a lot of ways. But the DP, Jeremy Mackey, was really good about figuring out, because we were in those rooms over and over again, making sure we weren't shooting for just as a small thing, the same wall twice for different scenes. And all of that stuff had to be thought out. Otherwise, it would have felt claustrophobic, I think, because you would have been in the same literal shots for too long.
Yeah. Him and Rock spend a lot of hours on Zoom.
Yeah.
All those four walls.
Yeah.
Trying to not repeat any shots. Yeah.
Jeremy, and we went,
Yeah, I quite like the fact that you had the Zoom shots in and the Zoom conversations in, because it, I guess, made it feel more visceral, and it kind of was a very, I guess, in a way, a stark reminder to the type of lives that we're living in right now as a society as well. And I think that was quite interesting. But I think, obviously COVID-19 has really changed the dynamics of life and the world as we know it. Recently Amazon Prime Video actually had released 2 Indian anthology films with COVID-19 as a backdrop, as a pivotal backdrop, and all the stories revolved around lockdown and COVID-19. And I think a lot of the films that are screening at London Film Festival as well, they have COVID-19 as quite an important, backstory and a setting as well in that sense too. So I think, do you kind of feel that the pandemic and COVID-19 as a whole now will almost become almost like a subgenre within cinema now, whenever we see films and stories emerging?
I don't think it'll be a subgenre. I think it's up to art going forward to acknowledge our lived reality or not to. And it will be everybody's judgment when we're ready to confront it and when we're not. But I don't think the COVID experience is a subgenre of our lives. I think it's everybody's life. So I think it will permeate everything ultimately, or not. There will be the worlds that exist in the escapist fantasy of this never happened to us. And then there will be the films that acknowledge it to varying extents. But I think increasingly, as we realize that this pandemic is not ending in a sense, but that it will become endemic, to go from a pandemic to endemic, that there will be a similar reflection in our art. But what's a weird example of the way that they're handling it is Marvel with the blip. And now everything that's taking place in the current phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is post-blip. And every now and then they're like, guys, remember when the blip happened?
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
And there's these like support group signs that are like post-blip support groups that you see briefly in shots. And so it's part of their lived reality, but it is not like the centerpiece of the narrative.
Right.
So that is, I think we're heading from it being a pandemic in movies to being endemic in movies, but that's my personal opinion.
Interesting. Karan, would you like to add anything to that as well?
Oh, I thought that was profound. Wow, I'm going to steal that.
I love that. Yeah.
Compliment I can give is when I plagiarize him. That's my highest compliment.
That's his highest compliment.
Yeah. No, but that's wonderful. But I think, as you guys mentioned as well, like you said, that whole sort of, I guess, everything in place when you were shooting. And I'm sure there must have been quite a bit of a shock to you guys though, right? When you were back on set and I think filming, I guess the whole machinery must have been quite different. Did you feel that difference as well, Karan? Because obviously you've been doing a lot of work recently as well, pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic too. So have you noticed that shift as well a lot in terms of the sort of way films are made now?
It honestly feels to me personally the exact same. It's just that you don't see people's faces, which is the biggest bummer. So normally I think like everything else is pretty much like you get so used to like the testing and all of that stuff that after a while you're like, oh yeah, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have to get the test or whatever. There's just a lot more anxiety. Especially for actors, there's anxiety that you'll test positive before your first day and be replaced. Actors now talk about this all the time. Like we didn't have enough anxiety going into these projects. There's always that anxiety of like a shutdown of some kind, and that's like a whole stress. But in terms of the actual filming, I think even on our movie, once we were in the groove of it, it was like we were just shooting the scenes, rehearsing the scene, shooting the scene, rehearsing the scene. It's all that is still the same. It's just the anxiety on our movie. We put in our own money partially into it, and so we were legally liable if someone got sick or something happened. So I mean, the anxiety on ours was like so much because we were, for health reasons, like, asking these people to come out during a time when there were no vaccines. And we also didn't have a budget for, if we had to shut down, we didn't, we were going to lose the location after a certain date. We didn't have like money, like a studio in the bank, to be like, we can shut down for 10 days, have the crew come back. All the crew was going on to do like bigger TV shows the day we wrapped. And so to us, like, the anxiety was crazy. I mean, Roshan organized the entire COVID situation for the movie, and he would wake up at 4 a.m. every other day and look at the test results. And then he'd be like, we can film today. Everyone is negative. And like halfway through the shoot, we were like, do we have enough to cut together into something? What if we shut down tomorrow? I mean, it was just the most anxiety. So for me, when I've gone on other shoots, I'm like, at least it's not on me.
Yeah, at least you're covered. Yeah, true.
Yeah, but like the anxiety, that, like, to the point that I think, it's the first time for us making a movie like this, like putting our money into a project or anything. And we were like, God, if it wasn't for COVID, we could make all of this other stuff work, which is already so hard. But we were like, we could handle like indie filmmaking, but it's really stressful for smaller movies. I feel for everyone, because it's really, a crazy thing if you have to, shut down, and if people get sick or anything.
Very true. And I think that, kudos goes to, independent content creators like yourself. And I only know better as well how difficult it is, to kind of rely on ourselves. And obviously the fact that, we've got something like COVID, it doesn't help, because sometimes we feel helpless because we can't usually rely on ourselves at that point, because we have to kind of make sure everything's positive. So I'm negative, I mean. And I can completely understand that struggles too as well. But I think, Roshan, for you, I mean, the fact that you're obviously a physician as well in life too, which is quite extraordinary to see you balance both medical and movies. I think it's a wonderful combination. So I guess, given the fact that you are a physician in real life, I mean, to what extent will your directorials now going forward present medical strands, I think, to your stories and the sort of narratives you choose to present?
I don't feel like intensely interested in making movies about medicine. But I am always, I feel like, including pieces of it the way that this movie does. But as the primary setting, I think that was more interesting to me when I first started. But yeah, I work still as a physician for 12 weeks of the year.
Okay.
So I still have one foot in the world. And then the rest of the year I'm writing.
I think from my outside perspective, and having worked with him in terms of writing, what is so amazing about like a byproduct of, I think, you being in that world, is that you get to interact with all sorts of people in everyday life, because everyone gets sick. And then everyone has relationships and stories and things, and it's an open door to like the world coming in. And I think that can really shows in your writing too, of like, in Hollywood, what happens a lot of times is we're just in a bubble. We're in LA or New York, and we're having the same conversations, often about Hollywood, often about traffic in LA, often about, and you sometimes, I feel like, as a writer, are limited by like what you're seeing out there in the world after a certain point, once you've excavated your own stories. So I think that's what seeps in a lot of times too in your writing, is just you're living life and seeing people like 12 weeks from all walks of life with all sorts of experiences.
You're out there in the world. But I also think it's like, I do feel like people in Hollywood need to spend more time like taking care of other people, because there's such self-obsession in this industry. And there's something about like just existing in service of someone else for a few weeks a year that is very refreshing, because it's so different from the rest of the industry. And then I think it's hard for people to make art continuously. Like, I do think you need a little break from it. And like, actors get it a little bit because they take months off between acting.
Not by choice,
but not by choice. But I think
we get to travel. And
you get to travel.
you
get a little bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of a silver lining, I guess, attached to that profession in that sense as well. You know, you do get to travel, which is great. But I guess the early mornings you have to wake up for shoots. I can imagine how difficult they must be. But actually, Karan, I wanted to speak with you a bit actually because I've watched a lot of your work. Every time I see you, never fail to make me laugh, and I think you seem to be such a natural when it comes to humor. So I just wanted to first tell you that.
So nice.
Mention you that. So that's really wonderful to kind of see that skill you have. But where do you have this knack of humor? Actually, where do you think it's kind of stemmed from? And does it come as easy to you as much as you easily portrayed on screen?
Wow. I didn't I was I guess like bullied a bunch when I in high school and middle school and stuff.
Oh,
So maybe
sorry.
that's no, it's okay. Maybe that's where it partially comes from. But I do believe that like a lot of it is just you're born with it. You can't really teach it. So I'm sure it was like a mix of that and mix of like I was not really easily accepted into friend circles because I grew up in India and like as a guy, I didn't play sports or do any of the guy things. So humor and sort of acting kind of became like my thing in this group of friends of like the thing I do or whatever. And I never really, thought of myself as funny or anything. And then it was really more when I came out here to America that I tried to sort of explore that side of me a little bit more. But I think, I don't know, I just feel like it just is naturally there or not. And then, in terms of doing like comedies and stuff, I really, it's my favorite thing to do. Like, because I was very much like, this is the best job because like your job every day is to just show up and like play and make people laugh, and that to me is like just full of joy, and especially when there's like a set where that's accepted and everyone's sort of it's just crazy that you're like that's a job. Like it's really crazy. So I love it. I love sort of doing all of that stuff. And
Yeah, and you know what? I feel for you because I think I've been through that phase as well in life where, because you choose to do something a bit more creative or you choose to do something that is not in the status quo of DCs, you suddenly become that outcast and people think you're the laughing stock. Even if they were interviewing a big actor, they'll be happy with it. But if suddenly someone else does it, they'll kind of laugh at you. And I know exactly how that feels. But what gave you the strength in life to actually overcome that and fight back? I mean, how did you deal with it? Because I struggled big time, to be very honest. I still do, actually.
Well, I have really supportive parents, which is very unusual, unfortunately, from where I come from and for most Indian people, I think, where they were sort of nervous about me doing this because they just didn't understand like how I would make any money. But so that's legitimate, but also they were always really supportive. And so I think that really, if they weren't supportive, I don't think I would have done any of the stuff that I did, because it was always nice to know that like I didn't have like them to like convince or do anything with, and they never pressured me to go into any of the traditional sort of jobs that Indians usually have. So I think it's like absolutely huge, and they still are always supportive. My mom was texting us today and she's like, how many film festivals have you played? I need to tell people. It's like, oh my gosh, okay.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I think also, Karan, though, I would like to get your perspective on this as well. Obviously, like every time I have a conversation with actors, there's always that whole sense of fear of making sure they completely do not box themselves into a particular image or, sort of get stereotyped into doing a particular style of, works in that sense as well. So has that ever been a fear for you? Have you ever feared of perhaps doing an influx of comedy films and getting typecast as well in that sense?
That's a good question. I used to have those fears really the first few years that I had any sort of success or anything, but I realized like more and more to not think about any of that stuff, because I think like no one is really thinking of it as much as you are. Like no one cares. And I think that can sometimes interfere in like you like looking at something that is in front of you and being like, I don't know. Like I just always try to be like, is the script good? Because most scripts are not good. So when there's like like I did a movie this summer where I had a really small role, but like the script was so good, and it wasn't even my role particularly, but I'm like, I'm just so happy to be here because like there's such few things that are like good, I feel. But if the script is good, and then if there's just people that you want to work with, it doesn't, I'm just like, life is short, and like I'm more than happy to just have those experiences. I feel like personally for me, like if I overthink any of that stuff, like 5-year plan, whatever it is, like I don't know, I just feel like I'm never happy, and I'm just in my head, and ultimately none of it really matters that much.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said there. And as well, and I think, it's taken a long time, for our Indian voices to be heard in the West through cinema. I think it's still a battle that we're fighting. But thankfully, through at least now we're in positions of power where we're creating our own content, and I think that's something which is so empowering. So what is your opinion in terms of the representation of Indians in international cinema, be it through the roles or be it through the sort of, I guess, positions we're in terms of artists? Roshan, would you like to go first for this one?
Yeah, it's always been really interesting to me. I started writing in the industry in 2015, and I became a working writer by writing exclusively about white people. And at that time, I would not have dared to have an Indian character. And that changed very rapidly within a few years, to the point that I pitched a show with an Indian lead, which became eventually The Resident. And then beyond that, began to imagine more and more diverse content. And now almost exclusively write content that has some diversity angle, whether that's gay or Indian or both. So there's been a huge sea change in the industry and its ability to accept stories of people who don't look like the mainstream. A lot of that is commercially motivated. I think the wellspring of interest in Asian American content is very much related to the Chinese market. And so a lot of these executives are not, I don't think, doing it out of like a genuine desire to tell Asian American stories. I think they're doing it for financial reasons that often don't even bear out. So I am looking for more of the sincerity behind it. I think that will ultimately come, because what I don't think that the people in charge fully realize is that telling stories about Indians or Asians or African Americans, all of those people, is commercial, and people do want to see it. And everything becomes a referendum on diversity, like Shang-Chi has become a referendum on diversity, when a lot of this art is succeeding not because it includes diverse talent or because it's quote unquote representational, but because it's good and it features minorities, is almost incidental to it. So it's changing very rapidly. I think one thing that's happening in the world in general is that it's getting smaller, and that content is getting smaller too, and that Indian content is harder to separate from American Indian content. So I see where that goes too.
That's so true. And what about you, Karan? Have you ever faced difficulty actually because of getting like significant parts, because of the fact that there was, when you began as well, a major lack in terms of representation as well? Did you ever feel that sort of difficulty in terms of getting that scripts that you wanted, or wanting to do the roles that you wanted to do?
Yeah, no, definitely. In the beginning, I started auditioning in 2009 or 10, and back then, like whatever I had noticed, like on TV, because I was auditioning for like guest spots and stuff, was like called under 5, where you have 5 lines or under, and they would always be like, we would cast like a non-white person in this role or something, like. And so that was all I was sort of going out for. And then I remember at that time my biggest dream was to be a series regular on a TV show, and I remember there was literally like 0. And then there was Mindy Kaling on The Office, and then I remember Danny Pudi on Community, and I really wanted to be on like a sitcom or something, and I was like, literally, there's like 2 people, and it just felt like, wow, like it's just so rare. And so then slowly I was just like, it's really like changed in terms of now, like most series, for the most part, have some person of color. There's still there's no Indian show where like it's mostly Indians majority, or Indian stories like on the show, but most shows have like a character that's completely changed. Like it used to me feel like, oh my God, a show will come every 3 years where they'll have like an Indian main character or something, who's like number 4 on the call sheet and like the funny Indian person on the show. But that seems to be like changing more and more and more. Like I feel like I've seen like huge change with that. So that's exciting.
And I think because of the fact that you've kind of I mean, not to quote Hannah Montana, but you've had the best of both worlds in that sense, where you've obviously, you were born in India, you've kind of grown up in America, you're working in America too now as well. So I guess it must be a conscious attempt on your part, right, to kind of give a flavor of both those cultures that you've grown up with, right?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I would say in the beginning of my career, like my pre Deadpool career, like I literally had like no plans of any kind. I was like, oh, this is a job, great, because like I couldn't one afford to be like picky like that. I felt, and also like yeah, I just wanted to work in this crazy industry where like it was so hard to get like started and all of that stuff. And it was more after sort of Deadpool that I was a little bit like, oh, okay, like what do I want to sort of do? I'll think about it a little bit more. And but yeah, I'm always looking, because I've more so done like characters that are not like Indian in terms of like they're not referencing like their culture or whatever. They look Indian because it's me, but like an Office Christmas Party or something like you reference, like it's just like a character that could be played by anyone. And so more and more like I feel like the urge to bring that side and part of myself, which 7 days was so perfect for, full circle moment back to Kalhonaho and me getting to just like rave about that. Like I'm really craving like that stuff. Like I'm always just like happy to tap into that side of me more now.
Oh, really? Wow. So I'm sure you'd be very happy to do a Hindi film then if you are offered it, right?
Oh, let's not go crazy. No, yes, I would. No, I definitely would. Yeah, I really would. I think that'd be
totally do
so
a Bollywood
cool.
movie.
I think that'd be so cool. There's so many cool filmmakers and stuff doing really cool things. I would love to. Oh my God. I feel like I'll never look better. Like the hair, makeup, and just the glitz. I'll be like, wow, my skin is just glowing, because they're all like, I'll spend 4 hours in hair and makeup every day, and like they'll be like, this is the best I've ever looked.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because even just Indian cinema generally is in a very different state now. We've got so many different language, like we've got Tamil, we've got Gujarati, we've got Marathi cinema, which is doing so fab, just to name a few. And I think it's a great time as well to kind of be a part of this sort of abundance of creativity that we're seeing. But I think on a final note, I guess having the support of Liz Cardenas and obviously Duplass Brothers production, I guess it must be very important, right, for filmmakers like yourself and artists like yourself who are fresh and who are, wanting their voices to be heard. I guess to have that support, it must be equally, quite wonderful to have that, isn't it? To kind of have that support.
Yeah. Well, I think that Mark and Jay are such a positive force in the industry because they are very well known and widely admired, but use all of their credibility and power to advance new filmmakers, almost exclusively women and people of color and women who are people of color. And that is not something that everybody does with their power, but they have created a little factory of first-time new directors who are not what Hollywood has typically employed. So I think they have, you think you can say this of so few people, but they have truly changed the industry as producers.
Yeah, it's really, there's all these people doing panels and talks and talking about diversity, and they literally are doing action. They're making tangible things you can watch and hear and see that are like words in action, like all like supporting all sort of minorities and all kinds of communities. And they're such a prime example of someone who actually benefits from opening up their worldview and generating that. Like, they're open to all these ideas, and they have all these films and things coming out and getting sold and getting made, and they're just championing people who have not had a voice before, and that's pretty much become their business now, which is kind of amazing. And throughout our process personally, we never got an offensive note of any kind. They never told us to tone down any Indianness, which we have definitely heard on other things before. And
oh wow, really? Whoa, really?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of that personally.
And like it just never felt like, it just felt like they were completely on board to be like, you tell like the version of the story you want to, and the more specific it is, the better. We wouldn't have been able to make this movie without them. Like the Jeremy he mentioned, the DP is someone that he has been in their family of crew members. We used most of the crew that they have used on other things, and right from like the accounting person to the lawyer to all these like behind the scenes people that it takes to make a movie. and like they literally, their stamp is all over this movie, and then creatively they sort of never were like controlling in a way that felt like we're trying to like, you know, move towards some like version of it that feels safe or not as sort of different
or
anything.
appropriated in any way. Yeah.
Mhm.
True that. But I think on a final note as well, I mean, I think I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the works that you have planned. So, Roshan, have you got any other films planned? And Karan, have you got anything planned as well that we can look forward to in the near future?
In terms of like writing and directing, I think, yeah, we're hoping to make another movie soon and just figuring out what it will be. But I couldn't even tell you because I'm so confused at the moment. But yeah, and then you're acting in a bunch of things too, in
And your
addition
movie
to
got made, Call Jane.
Oh yeah, and then Call Jane got made with I wrote that with a former writing partner, Haley Shore. But yeah, that did get produced in May of this year and will hopefully come out soon.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing some more exciting work from you both. And I think, you know, it's just so refreshing to see a film like 7 Days, and the fact that it was the first film that we got to watch actually as part of the press delegates. That was the first film we got to watch. So that was quite lovely to kind of see familiar faces and to explore my people on the big screen when it comes to film festivals too. But I can't wait for 7 Days. In fact, actually, I wanted to ask actually, so what's your plan on taking this forward as well? Like, have you planned an official release after the film festival circuit, or?
Yeah, it has distribution for likely early next year, and we'll be allowed to announce it whenever the long form contracts are signed.
Yeah,
but yeah,
for North America, we're still looking for the rest of the world to sell all those rights. So we're in the process of that now.
And that'll happen partly at BFI.
Wow. Well, I can't wait for that moment, and I'm sure it's going to be fabulous because everyone will be able to see what we saw. And I think 7 Days is very special because it's one of the first initial, I think, international rom-coms that we had, Indian international rom-coms that we had, which is set amidst the sort of lockdown and COVID period. So that's very special. And I think just having you both for a conversation today was very special. So thank you so much, Roshan and Karan, for joining me on Filmy Shilmi, and wishing you all the very best.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.